Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's edition of Credential Chats. This week, we are joined by the Assistant Registrar for Degree Audit, Athletic Eligibility, and Graduation at The Ohio State University, Lisa Duffy, Dr. Lisa Duffy, as of this week. Hi, Lisa. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and congratulations on your dissertation. And
Thank you.
that is exactly, why we're excited to talk to you is about your dissertation. So maybe, just to kind of start out, what was your research about, and maybe share just kind of what led to that research interest for you.
Sure, yeah. So my dissertation research focused on faculty perceptions of and motivations for being involved in alternative credentials. So I interviewed faculty who are involved in alternative credentials at a large Research One institution, and talked to them about what is motivating them to be involved in alternative credentials, what they think is valuable about those experiences. And I found that while not all faculty are 100% motivated on their own to be involved, those that I talked to understood the value of alternative credentials and wanted to see them be successful, and they wanted to see the learners who were pursuing these alternative credentials to be successful. They felt like having connections to the workforce was really valuable for learners. They wanted to make sure that they were making connections to industries and making sure that those connections made sense with the courses that they were teaching and the credentials that they were developing. So those were just really important things for the faculty. As you mentioned, I did this as my dissertation, and I really came to it based on some of my work in the registrar's office at Ohio State. We've been talking a lot about alternative credentials, micro-credentials, stackable certificates, just certificates in general. And so I've been able to get involved with that through my work in the registrar's office, and really wanted to sort of pursue this topic through my dissertation. And so I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I'm digging in just a little bit to that. And coming from the Office of the Registrar, and there's so many kind of places you could have gone with your research questions. What led you specifically to that kind of faculty perception point of view?
So I did a project in a class earlier in my academic journey that was looking at the impact of college on students, and we were supposed to pick a topic that we wanted to study, and I decided to look at micro-credentials and see how they impact students. And what I found through that project was that there's not a lot of focus on faculty and how faculty are involved in alternative credentials. I found a lot more on results, a lot more research on implementation, and I really wanted to learn more about how faculty are involved and why they want to be involved, why they think that these are good experiences for learners, or what they might be able to get out of those experiences for learners. So I really wanted to take that perspective. I used expectancy value theory as my framework to look at some of those motivations that faculty felt in this space.
Sorry if my eyes just glazed over there with the theory that you intimidated me with the big words there, Lisa. I love that, what you're finding right out of the gate really aligns with what we hear just week in, week out, of just this learner-centered focus of stuff. And so I think that's really reassuring to hear that that's where faculty are as well. And I think, it almost, to me, I think, and maybe some of our viewers, is kind of going to be surprising that, especially at an R1 institution, you're hearing faculty who are very much embracing notions of, we want the learning and achievement that we're credentialing to be relevant to industry, not just learning for its own sake. Like,
Yeah.
was that surprising to you as well?
Yes, in a way, yes. I think thinking about the way that a lot of our faculty are focused on research, and just faculty in general are focused on research. So I think learning about how they did want to support students, and they did want to make those connections to industry, and they wanted to make sure that these were really valuable learning experiences that had an application. So taking both the learning and the application of the learning, I think, was really, really valuable. Hearing about how faculty wanted to offer classes in a format that worked for learners, especially learners who might already be out in the workforce, who are coming back to pursue something, wanting to make sure that they're respecting both the time and the money of learners, was really something that came out of my findings. And I think just wanting to be flexible for learners, making sure that they were offering the courses in a way that was accessible for learners and that allowed them to learn the things that they were wanting to learn, not just setting a curriculum and deciding that that was all that was going to be taught. So that was.
And I think that where you were sort of going there also kind of dovetails to what I wanted to ask next, which is, where you maybe see connections between your research that actually have everything to do with registrar perspectives. And,
Mhm.
some of the stuff you were describing to me probably really can play into, our approaches to governance and how we design proposals and things like that.
Mhm.
Were there some findings and just connections that you see directly relevant to registrar and enrollment management professionals?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that it can help make connections between some of the ways that alternative credentials are implemented and making sure that registrar staff can engage with faculty and make sure that they're understanding their own motivations and why it is that they want to be involved. And I think also helping breaking down some of those barriers. Like I heard a lot about bureaucracy, working within policies, and just being able to not necessarily ignore policies and get rid of some of the bureaucracy because some of those things still matter, but making sure that registrar office staff can understand what faculty perceive those things to be and how they can help work within some of those structures would be really useful.
I just, yeah, there's just so much stuff that you're naming there that I think
Mhm.
is just so relevant to why registrar leadership is so important in these conversations on our campus,
Mhm.
and also, what we in the office of the registrar can be learning from, perceptions outside of our office, and
Mhm.
how to, I guess, think as communicators,
Mhm.
of not just what structures are important, but how we articulate that to our colleagues. Was that something that you were kind of touching on there?
Yeah, yeah. I think looking at the ways that we can make changes to or work within the structures that we have. I think a couple things that also came up were looking at various measures of student success. So it's not just about grades. It doesn't always have to be the same types of metrics that students meet. But what are the ways that you can still measure success and that you can assess within a program? And what are ways that you can be flexible in learning, whether that's like a flexible calendar or something along those lines, rather than sticking to some of the structures that exist. How can we make these things work for learners, work for faculty, so that there's still structure around those, but also flexibility. Flexibility came up quite a bit in my research. And I think also just recognizing that faculty are overcoming a lot of barriers to be able to offer alternative credentials, and not only recognizing those barriers, but helping to eliminate some of them too.
And that is such a great way for us to promote the work of the Office of the Registrar as well, just to be our
Mhm.
own advocates, not just for micro-credentials, but the work we do, I think. And I
Right.
love that you touched on those, with this being new, we can get weird and different about like what we
Mhm.
measure. You mentioned, just how, that is something that reminds me of, I think, some research out of Richard Westshop at BYU that was doing pre and post surveys on,
Mhm.
I think, home and family life contentment as a
Mhm.
way of measuring success, not just,
Mhm.
employment outcomes or something. And so I
Mhm.
love that that's where you took it, Lisa. And,
Yeah.
I guess another question is, you are not the only registrar professional probably doing postgraduate work,
Mhm.
in the country. And so just based off of your own experiences, would you recommend to others who are in the office of the registrar who are pursuing, advanced degrees that they
Mhm.
consider, looking at this micro-credential space for their own research?
Yes, definitely. I think learning about this has really helped me in my work. As we've been developing alternative credentials at OSU, as we've been talking about what it is that we want to do in this space, I think having an understanding from not only the literature, but from my own practice has really been valuable for me. I think also for myself, understanding the expectations of faculty, what it is that they need, how I can be a better support for them in my work has been really valuable. And having the scholarly background to be able to back up some of those things has been just truly valuable. And I think if anybody wants to pursue postgraduate work, I definitely encourage it. I know that it's not for everybody, but I think learning about micro-credentials was just a really great experience for me.
And for those people, do you have any advice, or are you willing to share your lit review?
Lit reviews, huh? Um, yeah, I think just finding mentors who are willing to support your work, whether that's somebody within the registrar's office, somebody else on campus, somebody else at another campus, somebody who knows a lot about whatever the topic is that you're wanting to learn about. I think that's the biggest piece of advice, is somebody who you can sort of have as a sounding board, who can help you think through your topic, ask you questions so that you can think more deeply about something. I think is really useful. I was very grateful to have people on campus who were willing to support me in various different areas of campus. It wasn't just one single person, but I had, you know, my direct supervisor was very supportive of my work and wanted to hear about what I was learning. And we have a lot of people on campus who are looking at micro-credentials. So just not only getting the opportunity to be involved in learning, but having them as a sounding board for my own academic work was really useful too.
And you made me think that incorporating micro-credentials and non-degree credential work and credential innovation into our graduate studies is a great way professionally,
Mhm,
internally, to get ourselves invited to different conversations that we maybe
mhm,
wouldn't normally be a part of. So I
mhm.
love that as sort of a professional development hack, if you will.
Yes, yes.
What one last question there that, just now that you've finished your work, as you think about where you'd like to go next, or where you hope other
Mhm,
people pick up where you left off, or just
mhm,
as you were looking into the space, research questions that
mhm.
you noticed that you thought to yourself, man, I hope somebody looks into this,
Yeah.
in the future. What are some of the research questions that, for people who might be interested in pursuing their own research that you would recommend?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my research focused on faculty who are already involved in alternative credentials. I think taking the opposite approach of finding out those who maybe opted not to get involved in alternative credentials, and what were some of their concerns, what were some of their fears about moving forward with alternative credentials, and sort of learning what those might be. So I think understanding why, but also why not, can be really, really valuable in helping institutions be able to think about implementing alternative credentials. One of my big findings was that a lot of the faculty that I talked to felt that alternative credentials and micro-credentials were more valuable when they were attached to a degree. So I think understanding more of that, what can that look like when an alternative credential is attached versus is not attached to a degree for a student. I think also looking at an institutional cost benefit analysis could be really valuable. Like, how much time are faculty spending on implementing alternative credentials, and how many students are earning them? And not that you need a high number of students necessarily to make something a valuable experience for those who do have it, but I think just understanding what that looks like. And I think also maybe understanding how some institutional policies can help or hinder the implementation of alternative credentials and micro-credentials. How having better frameworks can make it easier, or if there's too many structures that make it more difficult. And then I think just an exploration around different types of policies around implementing alternative credentials. Do they go through the traditional curriculum path that all other programs have to go through, or are there different types of structures? And I think kind of understanding how that bureaucracy maybe impacts the way that those can be approved.
I hear a common theme running through almost every one of those that you discuss, of just kind of change management. That in some
Mhm.
ways, yeah, this is about this new
Yeah.
micro-credential word or badge word or whatever. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's transfer, if you will, of this research to just
Mhm.
general change management within,
Mhm. For
the
sure.
bureaucracies of higher ed.
Yes, for sure.
Lisa, I know we're about out of time, but I just cannot thank you enough for joining us on AACRAO's Credential Chats. She is Dr. Lisa Duffy from The Ohio State University. Lisa, just thank you so much for your time and sharing your research with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And to everybody, thank you so much for joining us for season 3 of AACRAO's Credential Chats. Have a badge-worthy week and a badge-worthy vacation.